Thank you very much for having me here today. I would like to explain a little bit about what Thomson Reuters Foundation does, for those of you who don't know what we do. And then, as Paul mentioned, we will also focus on two of the activities that we had in Lebanon. So Thomson Reuters Foundation is a charitable arm of Thomson Reuters, the news agency. We are divided into three sections. One of them is us, Trust Media. So what we do is we provide journalism training courses across the globe to both journalists and also media and communication training courses to the governmental officials, parliamentarians, and also parliamentary staff. Another section of Thomson Reuters Foundation is Trust Law. They provide pro bono legal assistance to NGOs across the globe for free. Another part, the third part is Trust AlertNet, which is a humanitarian news portal. But I am part of the Trust Media team. What Trust Media does, we have been training journalists across the world. So far we have trained more than 10,000 journalists. We were established in 1982, so more than 20 years. Only in 2012, we ran 147 training courses in 45 countries. We also do a lot of other media development projects that I will look into in a later stage. We have been a partner on the TWC program, as George mentioned. I'm not going to go through that because all of you know about this, but we have been involved in training parliamentary journalists in all the 6 TWC countries, as well as parliamentarians and parliamentary staff. And we have also, outside the TWC program, we're also working on Georgia, working with CSO organizations in Georgia. Yeah, like I said, we are working on 6 TWC countries. I'll just go through very briefly about what we have done in each country. So in Lebanon, we have been running Train the Trainers courses, media communication for parliamentary staff, journalism training on oil, gas, and mining industries. I'm just going to mention very briefly about this particular, because it's not one of our generic training courses, but the reason for that is because the TWC program is a 5-year program, and because in this program we only target the parliamentary accredited journalists, and there's only a few limited number of them in each country. So after 5 years, you end up training people over and over. So what we did in 2011, we focused on some thematic areas, one of which was, for Lebanon, for example, was oil and gas industries, which I will look into that particular training course later on. We also did a regional training course on ethics and the standards of social networking and new media, which after the Arab Spring was one of the main basically focuses in the Arab world. We brought journalists from all AIPU countries, again to Beirut, because one of the reasons for, as it was mentioned before, one of the reasons for using the Parliamentary Center was to be able to run training courses there, so we decided to have the training course in Beirut. We have also been running a strategic communication planning for parliaments in AIPU, which again I will focus on later on. Just very briefly, in Ukraine we have done, again, trainers, TV reporting, which is one of our main training courses, new media and social networking, media and civil society, parliamentary reporting with a focus on covering corruption. This again was one of our thematic areas that we decided to cover corruption in Ukraine, which was our main focus in 2011. And also, as part of the TWC program, we produced a handbook. Initially, it was produced in English, covering all 6 countries across the TWC program, focusing on each country individually and the way journalists report Parliament, which is basically used as a guidebook. But then, in 3 countries of Ukraine, Morocco, and Georgia, we localized the content and translated it into the local language. So Ukraine was one of those countries. In Uganda, we ran Train the Trainers, parliamentary reporting, media communication, and covering budget. which was in line with corruption again. And in Mozambique, we ran media communication and parliamentary reporting. In Georgia, we ran train the trainers, parliamentary reporting, media communication, and crisis management, as well as effective communication. And in Morocco, media communication, elections reporting, financial reporting, and corruption and train the trainers. As you see, we have been running train the trainers in all our TWC countries. And the reason for that is after this program, these trainers will carry on training, and hopefully this would be an element of sustainability to the project. The guide to parliamentary reporting, like I said, was translated in Ukraine, Georgia, and Lebanon. When I was in Lebanon in 2012, the book was launched, the handbook was launched, which was like an event tied to one of our training courses, in which the Speaker of the Parliament attended as well. Okay, so we are going to just talk briefly about how we run training courses, and for that I just picked two examples in Lebanon. One of them was the reporting on oil, gas and mining in November 2011, and the other one was the strategic communications planning for parliaments within the AIPU countries, which was run in September 2012. Just to take you through how we run training courses. So the idea of oil and gas came out because Lebanon is getting prepared to explore basically and develop the potential offshore oil and gas resources. And we thought that would be an excellent idea to teach journalists in Lebanon how to cover such stories. Through WFT in Lebanon, we ran the training course for 12 journalists, and it was a 3-day training course, and the topics covered were economic risks, the money trail, the legislative challenges, and the fine print and contracts, as well as the impact of oil and gas industries on the day-to-day life of people. Usually on our training courses, in order to make it more interesting for the participants, we bring in a speaker who will talk about the real-life examples. And in that particular case, we had a speaker from Lebanon's Public Works, Water and Energy Committee, and somebody from Revenue Watch Institute. Throughout the training course, each participants are asked to write a story, which is part of the assignments of the course. But also, we were told that after the training course, 2 stories on the topic were published locally. The second training course was the strategic communication planning for parliaments within the Arab Interparliamentary Union, which I attended that training course, and that is when we had the launch of the handbook. The objective of the course was to enhance the effective external communications of the communication staff of these parliaments. We had 12 participants from the parliaments of Oman, Jordan, Morocco, Algeria, Palestine, Lebanon, and the AIPU in Damascus. It was an excellent training course. I can tell you for the fact because I was there. The topics covered were basically just the way it worked was each participant was given an opportunity to talk about how the communication strategy in their own parliament works. They were given the opportunity to create a strategy and then to identify the target audience, to write press briefings for the journalists, and then to develop the message to the journalists. And it was more about the role play, and each participant basically had the opportunity to act as if they were in the real life example. The good thing about that training course was we had the budget to measure success in a way, because quite often, because of the restrictions of the budget, you run a training course and then there is not enough opportunity to go back and to see the results. In this particular training course, at the end of the course, we provided the participants with a template of a communication plan, and they were sent back to their countries, and they were given 2 weeks to put the communication strategy of their own parliament together on the basis of that template. And then they sent the draft back to our trainers, and our trainers had the opportunity to make feedbacks and make changes and send them back to them. As a result of that, the Lebanon, Algeria, Morocco, Jordan, and Palestine, they all produced draft communication strategies, which were revised with expert input. In Lebanon, in particular, the draft communication strategy was presented to the Speaker of the Media First Advisor in the Lebanese Parliament, and it was reviewed and made changes as well. It is currently being lobbied for the Overseas Office to get the approval of the Speaker. And the IOPU, there were two really, really nice ladies who put together the draft, and it was presented in the IOPU conference in Kuwait in late 2012. Now, this is what we did in TWC. Apart from just running journalism training courses, we also focus on media development programs. One of them is we established an entirely independent news agency in Iraq in 2008 called Asbat al-Iraq, which was run with the help of Iraqi journalists. We also working with the European Journalism Center, EJC, and we have just registered, literally, I think, less than a year ago, registered the creation of a financial and business news agency in Zimbabwe called The Source. We have also established an independent website for Egyptian journalists in Egypt, which was initially launched as an election website only, but then was turned into a news portal, which is called Asbat Masriya. And we are also supporting Maghreb Arab Press, which is the Moroccan state news agency, in their transition to be independent. And we run, this is a 3-year program that we're running. And that's it. You can know more about us on our website, like us on Facebook, or follow us on Twitter. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nazanin, and I'm delighted to now present Jill Kia-Tuheri, who's going to talk about the Ugandan Parliamentary Press Association. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Paul. I will present on behalf of Kenneth. Kenneth is a member of the UPPA, which is the Uganda Parliamentary Press Association. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to come with us due to travel issues, travel problems. He wasn't able to obtain his visa. I'm going to try and reflect what he wanted to say in the presentation, but because it's not my original work, you'll bear with me. Some of the things that may not be articulated to the best of how he wanted them to be. But basically, the presentation is about the UPPA, Uganda Parliamentary Press Association. You recognize that as the program started, or throughout the program life, we've been concentrating on 4 thematic areas, which is the human rights, access to information, the financial oversight, parliamentary processes and management. And specifically for the access to information and the training of journalists, we chose to work with the UPPA, which was already an established body within Parliament and accredited to specifically cover the work of Parliament. So most of our interventions around access to information and training with journalists, working with Thomson Reuters Foundation, actually focused on building the capacity of this particular association as the key beneficiary, but ultimately also benefiting Parliament as a whole. UPPA was formed in 2000 following threats of freedom of the media in Parliament. Also, out of the realization of the strength of Parliament as an arm of government, they thought it was impetus on them to have such an association that actually has membership that covers or is a good representative of all the media houses in the country, including the little media the media groups, even outside the capital, far into the countrysides as well. These are the radio stations that probably cover most of the rural areas in the country. It has a 2-term democratically elected leadership, so they've got their little constitution, they've got members of the executive that that govern the body and ultimately report to the Public Relations Office in Parliament that is mandated with powers to accredit them as members of the association. They were formed with an aim to inform the public about the business of Parliament and basically cover the work of Parliament, advocating for media freedom, promoting professionalism through training, and providing an atmosphere in Parliament for journalists to do their work. And as you can see, they've got a fully furnished office within Parliament, which is readily equipped. They've got access to internet and printing services, photocopying services in their office. The relationship with the program obviously started in 2009 when the program was launched in the Parliament of Uganda. Since then, journalists have accessed tailor-made training for better reporting, and most of these have been done through our local training partner, which is an organization in Uganda called African Center for Media Excellence. These have worked in partnership with the Thomson Reuters Foundation in developing the course modules and delivering the trainings, and also doing evaluations or assessments of journalist training needs, which have ultimately informed their course developments. Our relationship with them also have promoted investigative journalism, and this has enabled journalists to go beyond their usual news reporting, but delve deeper into investigative stories, not just cover parliamentary stories at the source, but go deep and investigate, especially stories that emerge out of the committee work, stories that could emerge out of the Auditor General's reports, stories of corruption, and we've seen all this coming up as a result of most of the knowledge that they've gained on that training. They've also got knowledge on issues of oil and gas, which is a new area in our country, and journalists have also been inducted on parliamentary businesses, this covering the rules of procedure and basically parliamentary work in general. They've also been better organized now, equipped and better recognized in Parliament, with all this leadership system of theirs fully structured within Parliament. Their leadership is now recognized, and they now have the power to push for the rights that they need within Parliament as an independent media, because for a long time in the Parliament of Uganda, they were not allowed to enter the parliamentary house or inside the session, the plenary session, with their gadgets, for example, the cameras, the recordings, stuff like that. But of recent, they actually organized themselves, pushed for these requests through the commission and through the speaker, and eventually they were allowed to access the plenary with their recording equipment. They've also trained on the Access to Information Act, which was passed recently, and not so much has been done on the implementation of that act, and they have organized themselves around that and pushed for implementation of some of the clauses in this act. In the media competition, like Nazanin could have mentioned, through the program we organized competitions for the journalists on the course, and this enabled them gain more confidence to participate in even other international competitions and showcase their talent, and even go as far as winning prizes at that platform. Then the capacity to network with other organizations. For example, I think the relationship with UPPA and Thomson Reuters Foundation improved during this program, and the same goes for the African Center for Media Excellence. Having that network and engagement, constant engagement with the association helps the journalists improve so much in the way they work. The program also helped them train on social media and how to use that not only for the social beings of, how Facebook is used now, but use it in a more creative way on how that can be used interactively with other members of such associations and how that can improve the work that they do. So they got together with their leadership and opened up a Facebook page that has been very active and interactive, and invited some very important personalities in their profession within the country and outside of the country that keeps on, engaging them actively on the forum and helping them improve on their stories, critiquing, giving constructive criticism, and enabling the journalists to grow in a way. A highlight of capacity building activities comprise UPPA, the invited guests that I've talked about. The networking forum has also become a channel for mobilization, debate, and communication for the members, and they actually value it and own it. They still think they need further support as an association because they're still growing, and in that area they need more training on legislative processes and oversight. They need more training, more insight on in oil and gas sector. They still think they need insight in electoral laws and processes, the rule of law and constitutionalism. New issues in Parliament, like Parliament is dynamic and is always changing. They need to keep abreast with what's happening. Exchange programs and exposure to other similar forums like theirs or associations like those or other journalists that cover Parliament would be really useful for them. Also, they think they should start civic education on the role of Parliament or the role of the media and the Parliament in other parts of the country as well. They want to acknowledge the Westminster Consortium for the help. They want to acknowledge Parliament of Uganda for accepting them and partnering with them in a useful way. They want to acknowledge the local partner, which is African Center for Media Excellence, the ones I've worked with. They recognize the contribution from the Thomson Reuters Foundation and parliamentary journalists as a whole and the respective media houses that they belong to. Yeah, they need more support and support progress in Parliament. Thank you so much for listening to me. I'll be able to take questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Jill. It's my pleasure now to introduce Helena Shevchuk, who is the Programme Manager at WFD in Ukraine.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Today I'm going to cover the achievements of the Access to Information component in the Parliament of Ukraine. So, the main purpose of the media component was to assist the Parliament of Ukraine to achieve parliamentary communication standards by means of developing effective communication strategy, developing freedom of information legislation in line with international standards, establish parliamentary sustainable structures and systems, increasing communication capacity of staff, ensuring the Parliament website platform is interactive and an effective tool of engagement with civil society, and encouraging the Parliament to benefit from best practice of using ICT and new media tools. Before TWC program, the information and communication context of the Ukrainian Parliament was as follows. First of all, there was lack of proper access to public information legislation as a basis to exercise the citizens' right to get and to know information. The existing legislation on citizens' petition actually hindered the process of passing the proper law on access to public information. I'll highlight a bit later on the ambiguity of these pieces of legislation. The next point is the decreased desire for transparency on the part of members of Parliament and Parliamentary Secretariat. Before TWC program, only 30% of parliamentary committees have their websites. Nowadays, after parliamentary elections happened last year, October 2012, we have 27 parliamentary committees. And nowadays, 18 parliamentary committees have their websites. Actually, the increase of parliamentary committees' website is 11 new websites which were went online during the course of TWC program implementation. The next one is the Parliament experienced budget reduction and financial constraints. Lack of training program for staff dealing with information and communication issues, resulting to poor communication skills with media and public. Actually, the civil servants and the parliamentary staff had a lot of opportunities of training, to be trained, but not any training providers proposed training courses in media and information component. And TWC program and its access to information component was a unique one, and was exercised as a chance to get knowledge, experience, and to get new skills in this absolutely new sphere for civil servants and staff of the Ukrainian parliament. The next point is scant understanding of the role of information and communication technologies and social media, and how it is possible to use them as a means to engage the to encourage the effective engagement of citizens and increase their participation in political debate. Thus, the program met the following challenges in implementing this access to information component in Ukraine. Among them are to streamline the communication and information technologies and new media tools and values across the parliament and parliamentary committees, to make the most out of funds available due to financial constraints, to develop the pool of ICT expertise, both internal and external, and to make sure the partnership relations established are sustained and effective. The program approach was as follows. It was a comprehensive approach, that means joint efforts of all the stakeholders in improving the legislature's openness and transparency. They are the parliament and parliamentary committees, donor community. TWC efforts in information and communication component went hand in hand with other donors' efforts like USAID Parliamentary Development Project and some European projects. Media and journalists and civil society and CSOs networks. The program framework, actually it's a list of activities completed by the program in Ukraine. As I mentioned, since beginning of 2011, the information and communication issues became the priority for the Parliament of Ukraine. The law on access to public information was adopted in Ukraine in January 2011, and since May 2011 it was enacted, actually became effective. Please compare, just as an example, the UK Information Act was adopted and the staff had 5 years to be prepared to implement this law, unlike the Ukrainian situation when the staff of the parliament had only 5 months to be ready to properly implement the access to public information legislation. The law enacted in May 2011 is marked as a convincing success of civil society in safeguarding the rights of citizens' rights to get to know information. Freedom of Information Acts are seen as essential in ensuring open government and proper functioning of participating democracy. The law on access to public information is an incredible example for Ukrainian politics, as it is a result of a joint work of civil society initiative. It was shaped into a single member bill. It was upheld by the government of Julia Tymoshenko. It was also supported by international community, journalists, and passed through the consensus of the authority and the opposition. Thus, the new freedom of information legislation became instrumental in achieving a parliamentary benchmark, which is measured by a parliamentary openness and transparency, thus contributing to administrative reform and combating corruption, which is undergoing in Ukraine nowadays. So the program framework is as follows. Peer-to-peer exchanges and expert support in developing freedom of information legislation. it's worth mentioning here that the value of TWC program in Ukraine was that our program was very much supportive for the parliament at every stage of information and communication cycle, starting from the developing legislation, through providing external support on legislative issues, through establishing effective mechanism to proper requests from civil society and media, to capacitate the staff to do their work effectively, as well as TWC program succeeded in involving CSO network organizations specializing in information to conducting proper post-legislative scrutiny over implementation access to information legislation. Tomorrow, my colleague, which represents Ukrainian CSO, will present a case study how his organization was engaged into post-legislative scrutiny over the implementation of Access to Information Act in part of access of citizens to city plans. So the next activities are training courses for staff, journalists, and CSO. Our aim within media courses for CSO were to ensure that CSOs have the tools and expertise to be able to engage with media outlets, to communicate their messages effectively, as well as to teach the staff of the parliament to communicate the information which is usually overburdened with legislative terms in a more journalistic and more understandable way to society and citizens. TWC program developed some training materials which were highly appreciated by the Parliament. Among them are recommendations on using new media tools, new media for staff. The recommendations were launched last year, actually closer to the end of the program, and we are in the process of tracking the impact of those recommendations, how they are considered and implemented into parliamentary practices nowadays. Already mentioned the guide for journalists, how to report the parliament. I'd like to mention that the beneficiaries of this guide is about 2,500 journalists accredited by the parliament for this session. I think it's a good indicator of our effort. The next guide is how to engage with the parliament, a guide developed by the local partners for CSO. This guide also highlighted the issues already mentioned, covering the difference between the legislation envisaging citizens' petition and freedom of information request. It was a very difficult question, not only for civil society and journalists, and also for staff, because there was some overlap of understanding of these two pieces of legislation. Competition for journalists, already mentioned by the previous speaker, came out with an article in printed and internet media dealing with corruption in education system. Some accomplishments and changes in parliament practicing happening since the beginning since the implementing of TWC program in Ukraine. So the new pieces of freedom of information legislation, the internal procedures established to process freedom of information requests from society, amendments to parliamentary rules and procedures, ensuring parliamentary activities are more transparent. Here are, for example, a good example of budget committee. Before TWC program, the budget committee was one of the most closed committee of the parliament, but due to staff trained within our program and due to involving MPs into thematic networking events, including the workshop in Lebanon on financial oversight, the Ukrainian team developed recommendations which were related mostly to the committee's openness and the budget committee proceedings more transparent. And the committee reacted to these recommendations, and the head of budget committee released a strategy that all parliamentary recordings and minutes are to be available on the committee website within 24 hours of their adoption, as well as all committee documents are now available on committee websites. So, partially due to our program, the budget committee is now one of the leading committee of the Parliament of Ukraine in terms of openness and transparency and accessibility. I also like to mention, unfortunately it is not highlighted in the presentation, that the staff of the Ukrainian Parliament benefited from Georgia experience in especially not only the staff but Ukrainian CSOs organization benefited from staff of the Ukrainian CSOs from their to know on their experience in accessing the parliament. NGOs were very impressed with Georgia colleagues' experience, and so we were very thankful our Georgian colleagues for that, for sharing their knowledge and experience. So, as one of the accomplishments and changes in parliamentary practices is that the parliament now has some advances in international cooperation. The Parliament of Ukraine is now a part of ICT Parliamentary Network. It actually follows the World e-Parliament Conference and its recommendations to meet the e-Parliament standards in the Parliament of Ukraine. And in this process, the Parliament is very much associated and is assisted by the Ukrainian NGO like La Strada Ukraine, like Chesno, means fair processes and something like that. And the Parliament, we can track the changes in the parliamentary behavior in terms of openness for cooperation with CSO and getting their expertise in knowledge. Supporting evidence and some data to all the information delivered. As I mentioned, the parliamentary website was redesigned and 11 parliamentary committees, new committee websites went online. The flow of information and quality of data is delivered at a much higher standards due to training program for staff. Namely, the language was simplified the language of contact, increased frequency of updates. There are some sections added to documents, working documents, provided feedback options, and introduced partial English translation to some documents. TWC program was very supportive to the Parliament to identify and train a web group. Actually, we helped to set up a network of internal web staff and help them to establish good business relations, aiming to share experience. As I mentioned, we have 27 parliamentary committees, and nowadays only 15 have their websites. So there's a lot to be done in this direction. Since 2013, the Parliament is present in social media like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. A complex strategy for openness, as an example, the Budget Committee mentioned already. Then, as a good supporting evidence for the changes and achievements in parliamentary openness is the number of freedom of information requests from civil society monthly. When the legislation was adopted, it was actually a boom on behalf of journalists and civil society groups, as the number of freedom of information requests was about 300 per month, and the staff was committed to process all of them. In the course of this in the course of time, the number of freedom of information requests decreased to 130. This statement may seem wrong or awkward, but the reality is the more information is open, the more it is available, and it is easily accessible, the less requests are submitted to state authorities. And it's a good indicator that Parliament is more open, and information which the Parliament communicates is available, and the amount of information is increasing. Technology services for members of Parliament. means that the Parliament of Ukraine changed its internal practice. For example, we have 450 MPs in the Parliament of Ukraine, and all the documents, especially bills, which were ready for the first reading, were disseminated to the MPs only in the hard copy. Since the beginning of 2013, the Parliament effectively used the internal network, and the bills for the first reading are disseminated and communicated to MPs only online in digital format. And it also contributes to such issues like environmental protection and saving money and time for staff in doing this process. Number of applications or number of users to the daily users of the parliamentary, not committee, but parliamentary website is increased to 3,000 per day. And the impact, as I see it, having been for decades legislation focused, the Parliament demonstrates its progress in achieving greater openness, accountability and transparency through ICT and social media, engaging civil society into decision-making process more effectively, and benefiting from sustainable relations with the development partners. Here I should mention that both the local and the UK partners, the UK partners Thomson Reuters Foundation and the local partners Mohila School of Journalism, have very high profile in the Parliament, and the program never had issues with staff attendance of the activities conducted by these two partners. We do hope that those relations established with the Parliament will be sustained, and the Parliament will feel the support, further support. Thank you.
Alina Shevchuk, thank you very much indeed. Last but not least, Nicolette Mondlane from the Mozambican Parliament. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I hope you're not all tired. After listening to the speeches today, all I can say is thank God I'm not a member of staff. In Parliament, we parliamentarians don't give PowerPoint presentations, so I'm going to follow tradition and read a little bit and hope that I'm not distracting you too much. Linda, George, and the other members of the Westminster Consortium and guests, thank you very much for giving the Fourth Commission of the Parliament of Mozambique the opportunity to say a few words about our cooperation. I'd like to thank you in the name of the President of our committee, Dr. Alfredo Gamito. I am the Deputy President of the Fourth Commission. We were invited to talk a bit about our experience within and beyond Parliament in the preparation of a very important bill in the context of modern democracies, in particular Mozambique. And as Paul indicated, I'm referring to what we are now calling the Law for the Right to Access of Information. Just to put this into context, the drafting of the law concerning the right to information responds to a constitutional command in our Article 48 that calls for a bill to regulate the liberties and fundamental rights of Mozambicans. And we had struggled very much with the issue of finding an optimum medium between the notions of the rights of access to information vis-a-vis the imperatives of national security, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Furthermore, we had to bear in mind in the Commission as parliamentarians that our first obligation is to our electorate, and as such, we clashed with government when the proposed bill came to Parliament, but we were also very much aware that the majority of Mozambicans regarding this law are concerned with the processes of transparency in state administrative processes. In 2010, which is the beginning of our legislature, the committee was entrusted with the responsibility of dusting off the shelves of a proposed law by members of the media and civil society, which was then called the Media Information Law, that fundamentally addressed issues of concern pertaining just to the media. And I say dusting off the shelves because it had been deposited in Parliament 8 years earlier, and nobody touched it. So the instruction from our president, from our speaker, was to make the necessary legal considerations and consultations and ensure that it went to plenary for deliberation in this mandate. And on the morning that the law was distributed to the commission members, it seemed not just that there was an elephant in the room of the commission, but that we had an angry bull elephant in the commission room that was charging at us at full speed, and we had nowhere to run. So, and instead of the media rejoicing in the newspapers at the fact that finally Parliament was going to address the issue of the information bill, they actually ran with the news the next day that surely our commission was going to delay the process and that this mandate would finish and nothing would happen to the law. Besides this being a sensitive bill that deals with issues of national security, its consideration required a set of skills and knowledge. We accepted the challenge, and this was one of the rare opportunities in which the three political parties that are represented in the commission came together across political divides. Me being the anthropologist in the group, I was faced with the complex and challenging task of staying quiet because I didn't have a clue what we were discussing, which is quite unusual. And despite our great desire to work and present the bill to plenary, we had technical limitations because none of us in the committee had the experience or qualifications in the area. And to make matters worse, neither did the committee assistants. We are 16 parliamentarians in the commission, 2 legalists, 3 law students, 3 former district administrators, an anthropologist, 3 former school teachers, and 4 public administration workers. And it was within this context that our friends, the Westminster Consortium, stepped in. The consortium heard our concerns, and within the cooperation parameters of the Parliament of Mozambique, they assisted us in designing the path and activities that would guide the plan of support for the preparation of the deliberation of the bill. The first step was to establish training cycles with emphasis on legislative workshops, and we were advised by experts from the Mondlane University Legal Department. We established terms and references with a plan of activities with the consortium, and in doing so, we debated the real implications of working on this law of right to information. The merit of the workshop was that as members we became confident that our individual experiences as teachers, anthropologists, legalists, and so on, we were actually qualified to debate as citizens about the task at hand. And we felt in the end that we didn't need to be fully pledged experts in order to deal with the intricacies of the law. And we brought important issues forward for debate. We very much appreciate the fact that the Westminster Consortium did not force or suggest any of the technical advisors. We looked together at the pool of people that were available, and we found Mozambican professionals that were readily available to come and help us. The consortium never suggested that we should go for this or the other individual. Another donor, however, did say that they would pay for 4 years for an international technician to come in and assist the commission. And we asked, what is the background? What is his or her political outlook? Will this not influence our work? And we declined the offer of the other donor. We also had workshops, and we did national public consultations and debates, and the consortium paid for these nationwide. And we also had a study visit in the guise of what my friend from Mozambique was talking about peer-to-peer exchanges. And we came to the United Kingdom and had an excellent discussion with members of the House of Commons and members of the House of Lords. We had discussions with the CPA. We had a wonderful visit and exchanges with professors at Essex University. We talked about policy and we discussed lawmaking mechanisms in Essex. We met the management team in Thomson Reuters Foundation. We went to the International Bar Association. We visited Article 19. We also talked to the consortium. And the challenges, what we understood when we visited the United Kingdom and spoke to these different organizations was that, in fact, the challenges of Mozambicans discussing this law of access to information are very similar challenges to people discussing this law all over the democratic world. And I will never forget a lady from the Bar Association who had studied the proposed law, and she said, you know what, it's amazing that Mozambique has come up with such a good document. You're off to a good start. And when I shared this information with the president of the commission in Mozambique, he said, you know, when we read a very bad essay, we say to the student, you're off to a very good start, so that they don't get demoralized. But we were discussing issues of classification of information, parameters of access, payment for information, legal professional privilege, protection of whistleblowers, and so on. I won't bore you with the details. However, the result is that we have in Parliament, in the Commission, a 14-page document that proved to be an important tool in our deliberations when we engaged in public consultations in parliamentary forums nationwide. So when we finished our visit to the UK, it seemed as if the bull elephant had stopped chasing us. It stopped in its tracks and was watching us with anticipation. We also held public hearings in the city of Maputo with media because they were the ones who had proposed the bill. And last month, we had agreed with the media and civil society that, in fact, the Commission was on the right track, and the issues that they had presented to the Commission during deliberations had been taken up. The internet and media debated our deliberations online, and that was also a way in which we were able to follow what was happening in terms of public opinion. Reuters, in fact, are the ones who told us here in London that we needed to go onto the internet because Mozambicans are increasingly more so going on the internet and venting their views. So the Westminster Consortium for Democracy helped us to engage with that angry bull elephant that disturbingly had inhabited our minds. And today I can say very proudly that the bill has been passed. And we are it was passed by consensus. And in the next session, we will be able to, in Mozambique, I couldn't find the name in English. Maybe Mulovo can help me. We pass bills by generalidade and by especificidade. I don't know how you say that. The law gets passed in its generality, and then it goes back into Parliament to be passed with the specifics. We look into the specifics. I don't know how you say that in English. Thank you. Thank you very much. So that's why in all of the issues that our commission dealt with the electoral law over the past 3 years, and it was very difficult. And I'm also proud to say that this was done in-house. We did not nominate an ad hoc commission to review our electoral law. Out of some 800 articles, we only at the end disagreed on 3. So I have to say that the Westminster Consortium for Democracy made a huge difference. We talked about trust here this afternoon. We had trust with them because they never interfered in the political decisions that were being made in the Commission. I'd like to finish off by saying that I have a message for you, Linda and George, from the president of our committee. When he read the program for the seminar, he said, there must be a mistake in this letter because it says final learning event. And for us, a significant journey has started in our parliament with you, one that addresses fundamental democratic principles, and the Westminster Consortium Program for Democracy has made a difference has made impact in the outcome of our proposed bill. And without your support, the process of analysis of the law would have been much further delayed, and without a doubt, we would be talked about in the press, and our media and civil society would have been upset. And our expectation was, and still is, that this kind of support should be part of a tradition of cooperation among our parliaments. And after 3 years of partnership with the consortium, it's hard to believe that this is the final learning event. I was going to say farewell and so on and so forth, but in Mozambique we say até breve. We shall see each other soon. I'm quite confident that you will be back, and thank you very much.